I have miles and miles ahead of me, tales to listen to, time to spend. Up ahead, the road is bending. Wonder what's around the bend.
Hello, I'm Charles Kuralt. We're off again to meet a few people on the back roads of America. These are people you know, not from the front pages. They've never been on the front pages. They're people you know from next door and down the block. Their stories are some of my favorites from 25 years on the road. We have a lot of ground to cover this trip, a lot of ground and a most unforgiving sea. Here on the coast of Oregon, where the Columbia River meets the Pacific, is a terrifying spot where dozens of ships have met their end. On a river in Alaska, we'll see some voyages with much happier endings. On vessels Rube Goldberg might have designed.
Are eagles going to survive? Are they going to make it?
Well, I think that we're going to try to guarantee that they do.
While we're in Alaska, we'll meet Fred Robards of the Fish and Wildlife Service, trying with his own two hands and his own eagle eye to save our national bird. Of course, nothing can save these castles on the beach in Florida. We'll admire art that's designed not to last. But let's begin at the beginning. This isn't just any national road. This is the National Road. This is a milestone. People travel far too fast to read milestones nowadays, and whenever you find one, you can be sure it's on a very unimportant road. But when this one was put here 150 years ago, this was the most important road in America. It started 1 mile that way in Cumberland, Maryland, and it went that way, west. The road was a dream of Washington's and Jefferson's, and John C. Calhoun made a great speech in favor of it. He said, "Let us conquer space." The space he meant was not from here to the moon, but in 1811 it might as well have been. It was from Cumberland, Maryland, clear to the Illinois frontier. And they built it. With mattocks and axes and paving stones, they actually built the thing. West to the river town of Wheeling, and west to Zanesville, and west to the prairie village of Columbus, Ohio, and west across the Wabash. It was the longest, straightest road in history, and a marvel of the world. They called it the National Road. We stumbled upon a few miles of the old roadbed here in Ohio, a few cobblestones, a few massive old abandoned bridges, and we thought we'd better show you these things now because before long there might be nothing left to show you. Already this road is a nearly forgotten part of the American romance. This incredible road, which carried so many peddlers and paupers and preachers and politicians west to the new America, and carried so many poor families in battered wagons from worn-out farms west to a second chance. Ideas went west, mail and newspapers, and in fancy stagecoaches, Jenny Lind and P.T. Barnum, and in groaning Conestoga freight wagons, calico and iron and whiskey and gunpowder, all the things it took to build a country. The National Road brought Henry Clay east from Kentucky, and Abraham Lincoln east from Illinois. You mustn't imagine that it was just a road. It was an Appian Way, 66 feet wide for 600 miles. A finer road, an English traveler said, than the highway from London to Bath. It must have been impossible for travelers on this high road through the wilderness to imagine that anything would ever take its place. In places, the route of the National Road is now called US 40. In places, it is called Interstate 70, our new national road, on which the thunder of the big diesels drowns out the creaking echo of the Conestoga wagons. But in quieter places, the vacant windows of shuttered general stores still reflect the pathway of the original road. A handful of the fine old taverns which once watered the horses and brandied the gentlemen still stand. The one on Mount Washington in Pennsylvania is remembered as unusual. Its landlady was civil and her husband was sober. Nobody reads the mileposts anymore. Great green signs have taken their place, and the traffic roars up the hills past the old toll houses with their quaint list of charges. For every chariot, coach, coachee, stage, phaeton, or chaise with 2 horses and 4 wheels, 12 cents. Today's chariots pass without reading or paying. We just wanted to show you this much before it's too late. If you go slow enough and look hard enough, you can still find tracks in the weeds, the last faint traces of the road that made us a nation. The blue spruce and Sitka spruce and hemlock are coming down. They're logging Alaska. And when a tree falls, what happens to the bird who lives in the top of the tree? The big rare bird with the white head and tail feathers, the national bird.
Well, the fact is we have treated the American bald eagle exactly as we have treated the land he stands for, callously. Always in our history, if an eagle's nesting tree was valuable as timber, then the tree came down and the eagles moved on. They have moved as far as they can go now to the coast of Alaska, the last place on Earth where they're found in any numbers. And here, too, they would be facing eviction if it weren't for one man. On the rolls of the Fish and Wildlife Service, he is listed as United States Game Management Agent in Charge. What Fred Robards is in charge of, by his own choice, is eagles. A couple of years ago, he perceived that at the rate logging was proceeding in Alaska, the eagles didn't stand a chance. He knew of a law, the Bald Eagle Act, which was meant to protect the birds. In the face of powerful lumber interests, Fred Robards decided to enforce the law. Ever since then, he has wandered the waters of southeastern Alaska, going ashore in quiet places like Suicide Cove, with an incredible purpose in mind: to find every single eagle in the Alaska Panhandle and to mark their nests for preservation. What's more, he has won the agreement of the Forest Service that saving one tree isn't enough. Hundreds of trees around the nests must also be preserved. The subjects of Fred Robards' passion are wary of man and not easy to see, even here. But if you travel with him for a couple of days, you will be rewarded by the sight of one of these great birds soaring silently above your head, or fishing among the gulls on the distant shining sea, or looking for food along the shore. This one is an immature bald eagle who hasn't yet developed the distinctive white markings, but who was born with the distinctive courage and grace. In the instant you see your first eagle, you will know why Fred Robards means to save the bald eagle if he can.
I think it's a great bird. I really do. One that's completely, totally able to take care of itself. They have vision that is beyond comprehension. I mean, if it's compared to my vision, and I have 20/20 vision, they have vision that's perhaps 8 to 10 times the clarity of my vision.
The eagle is a perfectly enormous, majestic bird. Does he have any enemies?
I don't think that he has any enemies other than man himself.
Are eagles going to survive? Are they going to make it?
Well, I think that we're going to try to guarantee that they do. We're going to take those protective measures that we need to take up here. We're going to keep our fingers on it. We're going to see that we have nesting trees and nesting habitat. And we're going to try to suppress disturbance by man and killing by man. And we're going to try to keep the number of birds that we have here today.
It's in the official manuals of both the Forest Service, Department of Agriculture, and the Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of the Interior. Eagle nesting areas will not be disturbed. Fred Robards got that language in there. If you ever doubt what one man can accomplish in a big government, think of him. If you're ever lucky enough to see an eagle on the wing, think of him.
Man is a dreamer. Tell him a simple story and he'll make of it an heroic epic. Show him the farthest stars and he'll try to imagine what's beyond them. Deposit him on a beach and before you know it, he'll be building castles in the sand. He will do this compulsively and without invitation. All anybody needs to build a sandcastle is a low tide, an hour or two, and a flight of fancy. When you add the lure of a contest and a prize, as the Sheraton Sandcastle Hotel has done today at Sarasota, you get a beach full of dreamers, old and young.
Right, that's going to be the front. We got to make those little things across here. And there's going to be a gate right there. Hey, how big?
A handful of sand is an anthology of the universe, a poet wrote. Many hands full, shaped and sculpted, become a mermaid. Or a crocodile. Or a parrot. Or a whale. Dreams take different settings. They can be as mundane as a city street.
Why don't you bring it over here, Carol?
Or as fanciful as Camelot. The world demands that we face reality. The beach invites us to forget all that. Edna St. Vincent Millay said it well. Safe upon the solid rock the ugly houses stand. Come and see my shining palace built upon the sand.
Now the grand prize. Number 8, Cinderella Slipper in the Princess Castle.
It was a Cinderella's slipper that won the contest appropriately, and within an hour, most of the contestants were gone, back to the real world of cooking dinner and doing homework, and the tide was coming in. Dreams don't last. Castles crumble. Two things only are certain, that during the night the waves will wash the beach bare, and that in the morning some child will be out on the beach building a sandcastle. Winters in Alaska are long and dark and cold, and so when the winter is over, you can't blame people for whatever they do. It's 5:30 in the morning, and if you think you're ready for this, it's time for the start of the Fairbanks to Nenana raft race. This madness was conceived in a bar a couple of years ago, and after both of the original contestants survived, 50 were encouraged to enter the race last year. This year, no fewer than 175 rafts are pushing off into the swift current of the Tanana River with some vague idea that tonight or tomorrow or sometime next week, they will reach Nenana, a settlement 65 miles down the river. The only rules are that every raft must have at least 4 oil drums and must not have any kind of motor. There's one upside down within the first 2 minutes. It's going to be that kind of day. There are father and son rafts, all-girl rafts, and skyscraper rafts. The favorite names for these vessels seem to be Life Raft, Riff Raft, and George Raft. Some contestants paddle, some pedal, some sail. Most merely sit tight and hope for the best, which is to say they hope they won't run aground, be run down, or be swept into a tributary that wanders out into the trackless Alaskan waste. One guy last year wasn't found for 2.5 days. You can keep track of the contestants by the sound of construction downriver, by bell, by cannon, and by concert band. You can also keep track of the race by the trail of wreckage and beer cans as the afternoon wears on. Anyway, somebody won, everybody else lost, all survived, but few were the entirely sober finishers. They're going to send a launch up through here tomorrow to pick up the castaways. If you're afraid of the sea, Mr. Fox, you never should have left Boston. Those were the taunting words with which Oregon was founded, in storm and in death. They were spoken by the headstrong Captain Jonathan Thorne of the brig Tonquin, right out there at the mouth of the Columbia River on a stormy day just like this one, March 22nd, 1811.
The surf was up just as it is today, but Captain Thorne, master of the brig Tonquin, completing a 6-month trip around the Horn to establish a fur trading post for John Jacob Astor, decided to cross the perilous bar into the river anyway. He ordered First Officer William Fox and 6 others over the side in the whaleboat to take soundings. Fox protested that the seas were too high, but in the face of his captain's taunt, he lowered the boat. It was capsized in an instant, and Officer Fox and the others drowned.
The Tonquin herself was thrown across the bar and into the river and came to rest right here. Her shaken survivors became the first American settlers on the Pacific coast. The British, who claimed Oregon for God and country, were challenged now by the Americans, who claimed Oregon for John Jacob Astor and the almighty dollar. Astoria is still here. Her sons still go down to the sea in ships across the fearful waves at the mouth of the Columbia. They are the descendants of men who, if they were afraid of the sea, never would have left Boston.
A Yankee sea captain, Robert Gray, discovered this fabled river in 1792 and gave it the name of his little ship, Columbia. Up here on the hill above Astoria Harbor, the Columbia River Maritime Museum displays a model and preserves the record that Gray found the river exceedingly difficult to enter. Since then, others have found the same. The collision of the river's current with the tides of the sea shifts the sandbars perilously and raises breakers that can reach 100 feet in height. Hundreds of great ships have followed the Tonquin's whaleboat to the rocks or to the bottom. A sudden shift in the wind, a failure of rigging, a helmsman's momentary lapse of judgment, and the mouth of the Columbia has claimed another victim. In the 165 years that followed the founding of Astoria, the Columbia River became a lifeline to the world for Oregonians on shore. For some of those who went to sea, it became a graveyard. There are protective jetties now and a dredged and buoyed channel, but captains still bring their ships into the Columbia with all hands at their stations and all their senses tingling until they're across the bar. They know this is still a place unparalleled in the history of ship disaster. And they know the rusted hulks and broken old bones of many a proud ship are watching them as they go by.
We came here to tell a historical story about shipwrecks. While we were here, the $3.5 million tuna seiner Betty M, trying to enter the mouth of the Columbia in a storm, went aground. She's down by her bows, her hull is cracked. She is a total loss. History does not end like a story in a book. Well, time to say goodbye until our next trip together. We've heard about a story up the road here, but we kind of hope we never get there. With luck, we'll stumble upon something more interesting along the way. I can see the road is bending. Wonder what's around the bend.
All these years I've been a-wondering, just when I think I'm near the end, I always see the road is bending, and I wonder what's around the bend.